Welcome back to Become a Calm Mama. I'm your host. I'm Darlene Childress. I'm a life and parenting coach, and this is episode 200. I can't quite believe that we're celebrating 200 episodes, 200 weeks of this podcast. That means that I've been airing and hosting this podcast for almost 4 years, which is really amazing to me and exciting. And I wanted to take a chance to make this episode a little bit special by telling you about my infertility and adoption story. I realized that I hadn't completely shared that part of me and my story with you. I've mentioned it that I'm an adoptive mom. I've brought that up before, but I wanted to have a chance to really narrate and really describe sort of how I experienced infertility and why we chose adoption and how that informed me as a parent and becoming a trauma-informed parent. On episode 100, I walked you through my ACE score, which is the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. I talked about the traumatic background and traumatic childhood I experienced and shared with you how I overcame a lot of those traumas and how that has informed me now as a coach. And this is also true of experiencing infertility and choosing a different path towards motherhood that meant that I did not birth children. And I think as a coach, having so many different experiences and backgrounds and painful moments in my life, it helps me become more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding, and help you as you grow. Now, my hope for this episode is even if you did not experience infertility, that maybe hearing me share my story might help you have more compassion for your girlfriends that are going through it, or a family member or something like that. Or maybe you experienced infertility and you have felt alone and sort of lost in all of that. Either primary infertility, which means the first time you try to get pregnant, or secondary infertility, the second time you try to get pregnant. So I wanted to kind of give you voice to the pain and a place for you to feel supported and loved on. And just an opportunity for you also to get to know me as well and a little bit more about my story. So this my kids are 21 and 19. So this is going back, 20 plus years ago. And I was pretty young, actually. I was like 29, and my husband and I decided to have children. I got married really young. That's like another episode I could talk about, how religion informed my marriage decision. But anyway, I got married at 22, and we spent, several years just traveling and building our careers and, buying a house and all of those things that were really important to us at the time. And then it became really clear to me that I really wanted to become a mom. I was a middle school teacher. I wasn't very satisfied as a teacher, and I was ready for parenting and becoming a mom. A lot of my friends were having kids, and I just really, really, really wanted to be a mom. Now, not everybody has that feeling before they become a mom. Some people, it just happens to you. It surprises you. You're not ready for it, and you pivot and you become a parent and you make the best of it. But for me, I was on the pill, and so we decided to go off the pill and see what happened. So that was around 2001, maybe 2002. I'm trying to remember, to be honest, what year. But anyway, it was around that time, and we went off the pill and started to try, as they say, to get pregnant. And the first, few months, I wasn't really thinking anything of it, kind of didn't get pregnant, kept having my period, no problem. And then, 6 months, 7 months in, I was like, this is kind of, not concerning, but strange. My sisters all had children really easily and, kind of like you breathe near them and they got pregnant. So I was like, I don't know what's going on with me. So I started to do like ovulation test strips to try to time it right. Did the basal thermometer, right? All those little at-home hacks that you can do to, increase your chances. And a year goes by and we don't become pregnant. During this time, I was pretty sad, to be honest. And my friends were becoming pregnant. And in the beginning, when I first started trying, I was excited for them. And I'd be like, oh my God, that's so cool. And, maybe we'll have babies together. And I was just, really thrilled and nervous and happy and all of those things. And then as time kept going on and it became more evident that maybe it wasn't going to happen for us, I started to feel jealous and scared and less than, a lot of different emotions that were really triggered a lot in my childhood as well, because kind of always feeling like I was odd, didn't belong, no one liked me, whatever. I had all those like insecurities. And then not being able to get pregnant kind of really brought all those up again. And my husband was super supportive, and he just like, it'll happen, it'll happen. And then it didn't happen. So at the year mark, we decided to go to the doctor to figure out what was wrong. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it takes a little bit of time to get those tests done because of the cycle. They need to check at different points in the woman's cycle. And then they also need to test the man as well. So it took a little bit of time, and then we got our results, and it turns out that my husband was having trouble conceiving, and that meant that we were going to need some sort of interventions. So we sat together at that time, and really we were not sure what to do. The obvious answer at that time was in vitro or even IUI, which is insemination, but that would probably not work. So it would be IVF. And like I said, this was 20 plus years ago. And I had friends who were going through IVF, not that many because most were, young, and really actually infertility. 95% of couples can conceive within the first year. And then of that 5% that don't, typically only 1% are truly infertile. So it's actually pretty rare. As you get older, the chances change and things like that. So we're all pretty young. So anyway, I didn't know that many people, but I did know some. And I was hearing just how much it cost and how devastating it was to think you were going to get pregnant and do all the shots and all the tests and all the stuff, and then it not happen. And we decided to consider all of our options at that time. We were not closed to becoming adoptive parents. In fact, I think there was a part of us that always sort of wanted to be at some point, like kind of have our own and then adopt some sort of thought. And so when it was laid out for us, like, okay, you can start the medical route or you can pursue adoption, I said to my husband that I wanted to pursue both at the same time. That was my thought at the beginning. I thought, let's just, make doctor's appointments and also look into adoption as well. So I kind of think I had appointments on the books to talk to in vitro specialists and pursue that. And then we also started to look at adoption. And I knew I didn't want to adopt through the foster care system. I felt a little bit overwhelmed by that idea. I also really wanted a baby that was mine, that I adopted, and it was final. Like, I didn't want this kind of court middle ground. I just was so desperate for this child, and I didn't really want it to be an insecure relationship. I was scared. I know now that that's not necessarily a risk factor, but I was scared that what if the birth mother came back and took my child away? That's what I was afraid of. So I wanted to do out of country. It's called intercountry adoption. I wanted to adopt out of the country. And at that time, we had a couple of options. We could adopt from Russia, from China, from Guatemala. Those were the main places that people were adopting from at that time. And when we sat in our adoption seminar and learned about the process and the costs and the wait times and things like that, the Russia choice seemed the most aligned for us in that you would have a baby in 9 months. And I was like, well, that feels about right because that's how long it takes to have a baby naturally. The other was like, it could take 2-3 years. One was like, you could have a baby tomorrow. That felt scary. So not really tomorrow, but like pretty quick. And I was like, let's just do the Russia thing. Like that felt the most aligned. And then we started to realize pretty quickly that we had to pick one path over the other, because if we were going to go the infertility route and the medical route, that was going to cost a lot of time and money and energy. And if we were going to do the adoption route, that was also going to cost a lot of time, money, and energy. And so I remember my husband and I, after the adoption seminar, we live in Los Angeles. So we drove to Santa Monica. I often find myself at the ocean when I have a big decision or I'm in a lot of emotional pain. I end up on the shore. So we sat on the beach and we talked about it, and we both kind of felt like, why not? Why not just pursue adoption? For Kevin, it was great. It aligned with his values. He wasn't really that inclined to have a bio kid. He wasn't that important to him, to be honest, which is unusual sometimes for men. But he just wasn't like that invested in his genetic pool. Like he didn't really care. And I wanted a sure thing. That's what I was about. I didn't want to go through round and round and round of in vitro and losses and in vitro, and like I just could not handle the pain anymore. So we said let's just adopt, and we did. Adoption requires a lot of what they call a home study. So it requires a lot of like psychological testing and evaluating your fitness as a parent and your home and whether you can provide for a child and financial proof. And it's like this very intimate process and intimate details about our life. And when you get pregnant, right? If you are just a person, you get pregnant, you just have a baby. Like no one asks you, are you qualified? Are you ready? Are you going to be a good parent? We had to answer so many questions about our marriage, our religion, our values, whether we were going to spank, whether we were believed in timeout. And I was like 29 years old. I didn't really know that much about parenting. So I'm reading parenting books and I'm trying to figure out all this stuff like before I even have a baby. And anyway, it was really intimate. It was like having someone look under the hood of your life and then decide whether you're good enough or not. And this was really hard for me, to be honest. They call it a paper pregnancy when you are adopting. And what isn't really accounted for is just how you are evaluated and determined whether you should be good or not. And it was painful. That whole experience of finding out we had infertility, pivoting to adoption, having all of those invasive questions and all of the intimate details of our life exposed into paper. I felt very alone during that time. I didn't really have anyone who was going through it at all. And I also didn't know how to deal with the pain of watching my friends have babies and give birth and have baby showers and have newborns. And I have these beautiful friends. I'm still very close to all these mamas. And they were in so much pain for me and felt tender around me and a little bit like eggshelly because they didn't want to share their joy with me because they didn't want to hurt me. And I felt so terrible to not be so present. I remember my brother sitting us down on Easter or something, and he's like, guess what? My wife's pregnant. And because it was my brother and I felt safe, I just started crying so hard. I had to like run out of the room. I was just kind of a mess at this time. Meanwhile, I'm over on my desk, like getting so many papers ready because when you adopt internationally, you have to have, it's called a dossier. It's probably about 100 pages of documents describing your financials, your house, your health. I mean, clearing you on all these different psychologically, all these different levels so that you prove that you are worthy of adopting a baby. And I appreciate the process because it's good, right? We don't want to put kids in dangerous situations. And at the same time, I'm like, I'm a good person, I promise. Anyway, it just brought up a lot of insecurity and pain. And also with the process, when we were waiting, we were told that it would take a certain amount of time once we turned in this giant dossier, which by the way had to be like notarized, certified by the state of California, certified by the United States government, then translated all into Russian, and then certified by the Russian government. I mean, this document just grew like, I don't think it was like 300 pages by the end. And that's your dossier. You send that over. Once you do that, you get on the list in this other country. Parenthetically, Russia has been closed for intercountry adoption for a very long time. I think the last one was like 2009. So this was around 2004, and maybe it was even 2008 that it closed. So you can't do this anymore there. And in general, most countries, there's not a lot of intercountry adoption at this point in time. Anyway, back then you would get on the list and then you would, be matched with a baby that was also ready to be adopted. And that was the lowest age could be 5 months old. So we thought we would get a baby around 5 or 6 months old, which felt pretty young. And while we were waiting, once we turned in our paperwork, the country of Russia changed the rule that said that the children must be at least 8 months old. So all these little babies that were ready for adoption at 5 months, and all these parents who were matched and ready had to wait 3 additional months in order for the children to be the right age to be adopted. That meant that we were stuck in this transition time where we thought it was going to take a couple of months to get matched, and it took much longer. During that time, I felt so sad. I just wanted to be a mom so bad, and my friends were having babies, and I just was like, why is this not happening? How is this happening to me? Our social worker at the time did say to me, she said, Darlene, you are going to be matched with the right kid for you. No one ever thinks, oh, this is the wrong kid for me. I should have got the kid 3 months ago or 3 months from now. And it did soothe me a little bit to realize that, yeah, I'm going to be matched with the right kid for me. And I just have to wait for him to be ready. And I spent a lot of time crying and being alone and being pretty desperate for this baby. I don't know if I can capture it just by talking about it, but it was as if a piece of me was missing. I just felt so much despair, and I could not wait for this baby to come into our life. And then in February of 2005, we got matched with our son, Lincoln. It was a really amazing experience. You get a small photo of him and that's your baby. It's totally bizarre. It's like at the time of the photo, he was 5 months old, and we just had one picture of him, and it was super cute. And it's like, okay, this is your baby. Now you need to go to court in Russia and file for adoption. So the way it worked back then was that we had to fly to where the baby was, go to his orphanage, meet him in person, and sign off on a decree that said that we agreed to adopt this baby. They didn't want people to get there and change their minds. They wanted you to see the baby. You would then get a court date. So that was extremely painful because we got to meet our baby and then we had to leave. And you can hear the tears in my voice because it was like meeting your child and then leaving them at a hospital that you can't go visit anymore. It was so painful to leave that orphanage and also leave my child in hands, not great hands, right? In poverty, in neglect, in malnutrition, in, just a very bad place. And knowing that I couldn't do anything about it and get on an airplane and fly back to my life. Woo, it was really hard. I cried a lot at the airport, and they said, okay, well, your court date will be in 2 weeks. So, it's like, okay, get home. You can do anything for 2 weeks kind of thing. And we waited and we waited and we waited, and 2 weeks went by, and we're calling our coordinator, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. The judge is out of town. There's been some holidays. We're like, okay, we're just waiting. And then finally we get a court date, and it's 8 weeks passes between the time we meet Lincoln till we can go to court. So we fly, we go to court, we get approved, and then there's a 10-day waiting period that you can't have your baby while you are waiting for the court decree to be final. So we do the paperwork, we see him, and then we have to wait again. And so we wait a couple more weeks, and then he's ours, which is amazing. We go through a visa process, and we fly home. And he's our baby, and he's 1 year old. So all that time it took from match to home, it was 4 months. And I was a new mom to a 1 year old. And that loss has always been a little bit hard, a little bit painful for me, because I do feel like I missed out on the little baby stage and nursing and all of those things. But yeah, we bonded immediately with him. We loved him to pieces. He fit right into our family. He definitely had separation anxiety. He definitely had attachment disruption. So we were working on bonding and trust and all of that. But in general, Lincoln slipped right into our life. And we started to go to mommy groups and play groups and meeting a bunch of my friends and that I now have still to this day. And it just was such a beautiful time of my life because I finally was a mom. I was finally at that place in my life that I wanted to be, even though I got there. I always say I arrived through the back door of motherhood in some ways. I got there and it was incredible and wonderful. And within a year, we decided to do it again. So the second time, it was like, let's adopt again. Let's adopt from Russia and let's adopt a brother for Lincoln. So we did the process. This time it was a little bit easier because we had done a home study before. We knew what to expect. We knew how to answer the questions. We already had a kid, so that helped a lot because we were a little bit more qualified or whatever. We had more information, filled out our paperwork. We dropped it off. We were expecting it to take 8 weeks like it did with Lincoln to get matched. And no, we get matched almost immediately, like within 3 days, which was insane. And then we flew to Russia like almost immediately, not with Lincoln. We met Sawyer and then we turned around, we flew home. We waited the 10 days. We went to court. We didn't even see him on that trip because his baby orphanage was far away from the courthouse, like a couple hours. He was in a very rural part of outside Moscow. And so we went to court, turned around really fast, came home, and then 10 days later went back and adopted Sawyer. And he came home with us. And then we had 2 kids. They're 22 months apart and they were adopted 2 years apart. And Sawyer, we brought him home at 12 months as well. And with Sawyer, he also slipped right into life. The sad part for him, which we didn't realize, is that he was one of those kids who had a lovey and, sucked his thumb and rubbed like a little blankie. And they don't care. The orphanage doesn't see things as belonging to one child. So they didn't give me his lovey. And so there was a lot of crying and a lot of drama on the flight home with him. It was really chaotic. I always think of it like Lincoln's birth was easy. Like his pregnancy was hard, but his birth was easy. And Sawyer's pregnancy was easy, but his birth was hard. And I'm saying that like the paperwork part for Lincoln and the process was so hard, but then getting him was so easy once we slipped in with him. And Sawyer, that transition was harder. And then of course I had another son. So, he's 3. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, like kind of within a couple of months of deciding to have another baby. Now we have 2 kids, 3 and 1. And it was great. It was great, really intense, as you all know, when you have 2 little kids, just cuckoo pants. Lincoln was cuckoo pants. He had so much energy. Now we know it's ADHD. It was pretty easy going for the first year or so. And then I've shared this many times. It was around when Lincoln turned 4 that his behavior really escalated quite a bit. He became aggressive with his brother. He became, difficult at preschool, really major meltdowns, just a lot of dysregulation, impulse control, anger, just, all the classic ADHD behaviors that when you see him in a 4-year-old boy, you're like, well, that's normal. But you also know it's a little outside of normal. And it's because of his behavior that I started to get support. And what I did was I started to go to parenting classes that were offered through the organization that did our home study. And I started to do take parenting classes through that organization. And that's where I met Jeanette Yoff, who became my darling, who became the person who saved my family, who changed the trajectory of my parenting forever. And she's actually a guest not next week, but the week after on the podcast, because next week is Thanksgiving. But the week after that, I have Jeanette coming on, and you get to meet her and learn from her, and just our rapport is really beautiful. But it was meeting her and starting to learn about trauma-informed parenting, starting to understand feelings drive behavior, learning to not take behavior so personally, learning about the word emotional dysregulation in 2006, 2007. Like no one was talking about it back then. Well, I guess this was like 2008. But yeah, like learning about these phrases and like how the brain works, discovering Dan Siegel, reading Parenting from the Inside Out, learning about the amygdala, the nervous system, stress response, cortisol. I mean, all of that was just new to me and also new in parent education. And so my brain just exploded in so many amazing ways because I could see a pathway for my family to heal. And the reason why everything was just outside of norm with my kids is because Lincoln had ADHD and Sawyer had sensory processing disorders. So they had disorders, but also because they experienced a year of neglect being in Russian orphanages. And all that time, when I was preparing to become an adoptive mom, nowhere in my education was I taught the words trauma or trauma-informed or attachment, insecure attachment. There was no education about what I might experience by adopting a kid from a Russian orphanage. All of my training and everything I have learned has been because I wanted to parent these kids well and do right by them. And everything I learn, I share with you, with the people I work with, because I believe that if we can practice compassionate parenting, we can learn self-regulation tools for ourselves and teach those skills to our kids, that our kids, any kid, can benefit from that. So if it works with kids with neurodivergence, if the processes that I teach work with kids who have experienced trauma, if these practices work with kids who have more extreme behavior, then wow, you all are going to benefit from them as well. Yeah, that is how I became a mom. And then that's how I became a calm mama, is because I became a mom of kids who really had experienced trauma as children, and that had nothing to do with me. It's just the way it was. And they were, for a variety of reasons, different reasons, they became available for adoption. Their birth mothers relinquished their parental rights for different reasons for each of them. And because of that loss that birth mother had, I became an adoptive parent. And I'm always very tender about my kids' loss. We're open with them. We talk about adoption very openly. They each have a different relationship to adoption and to their story. And I've learned a lot about trauma and how to process grief and loss and feel feelings. And for the most part, the boys are really adjusted to their story. I think as they grow, they'll discover more and more parts of them that maybe feel wounded or abandoned by their loss of their birth mother and their birth country and their birth father. We've seen some of it, like in terms of curiosity around their biology, their genetics. They both did 23andMe before it was a defunct company, just to learn about themselves and learn about their genetic history and their genetic connection. And then for me, being an adoptive mom, having kids who don't look like me and don't look like each other, it's always kind of been interesting. I remember one of my very good friends, it was where the boys were little, like in kindergarten, and she and I had just met, but we weren't really friends yet. And she looks at me and she says, "Wow, it's so weird. Your kids look nothing alike and they look nothing like you." And I was like, "Yeah, that's because they were adopted." And then she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I was like, "There's nothing to apologize for. I don't have any shame about this. I have grief. I have sadness over my own loss of the ability to have biological children, but I don't have any shame about being an adoptive parent. I don't have any shame for my children. I'm just grateful personally that, their loss was my gain. And I hold both of those things quite tenderly and make space for their loss. but they're pretty well adjusted. It doesn't come up that much, but it does sometimes. And we talk about it, and yeah, they're really comfortable with their stories. I was going to add one last thing is that, I couldn't get pregnant for like 10 years, stopped trying with the pill in 2002. And then in 2012, became pregnant out of nowhere. It was super crazy. I had no idea I was pregnant because I had never been before. I did not know what was happening to me. And I just thought I was tired. I don't know. I lost that baby at 11 weeks without knowing that I was pregnant. And so I passed the embryo, which was really painful and sad and terrifying because I did not know what came out of my body. Maybe that's TMI, but anyway, that was a shock. And then I had 2 more miscarriages, one in 2013 and one in 2015. So those losses are painful. I do think about those 3 little ones that I've lost and the, missed opportunity to maybe become a bio mom. But at the same time, I'm grateful for our family, for our life, the fact that I'm 50 years old and I'm empty nest and able to build my life and have this decade. For me, it's really cool. So I'm grateful for how things played out. I'm actually really grateful that I have these children, the ones I specifically have. And I know that would only have happened through this infertility and adoption story. And I just feel grateful. I feel grateful for you, for listening, for caring about me, for allowing me to tell my story and share some tender things with you. And if you experienced infertility or you are going through infertility right now and you just want some support, you can feel free to reach out. I'm here. I also just want to leave you with this encouraging note that whatever happens in your life, whatever pain you go through, even when it feels unbearable, like it's going to sweep you under and drown you, it won't. You are really strong and you can handle it and you can pivot and you can always find a new normal and a new place of peace. And that is forever available to you and to me and to anyone you know. So giving you a message of hope as we head into the holiday season and just lots and lots of love. Thanks for listening. Hey mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do 2 things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that again at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies, just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.